The soft chime of the bell above the door echoed as I flipped the sign to closed. Another quiet Sunday at Jasmine's Books, my little sanctuary tucked between a bustling coffee shop and a vintage boutique, where time seemed to slow and every book held the promise of escape. Golden sunlight spilled through the windows, casting long, warm shadows across shelves of hand-picked stories. Each spine wasn't just a title, it was a doorway, a possibility. My phone buzzed on the counter, a reminder for tonight's family dinner. I sighed, already bracing for the usual routine, veiled jabs disguised as concern, compliments sharpened with condescension, all served under chandeliers in my parents' high-rise penthouse. I changed into a simple blue dress and left my bookstore name tag on the counter. No need to dress to impress. No matter what I wore, it would never be enough in their eyes. The elevator ride to the 47th floor felt like an ascent to judgment. Even before the doors opened, I heard my sister Victoria's voice spilling into the hallway. The merger's worth $80 million, can you believe it? I slipped in quietly, not quietly enough. Well, look who decided to show up. My brother Andrew smirked. How's the little bookshop, Jasmine? Still keeping the lights on? The store's doing fine, I replied, slipping off my coat. At 32, I was the youngest of three, and to them, the family disappointment. Mom swept in from the kitchen, flawless in a designer dress, makeup immaculate. Jasmine, darling, you look tired. That little shop must really take it out of you. If only she knew, just this morning, I'd been on a call with investment bankers, orchestrating a deal that dwarfed the value of her penthouse. But I just smiled and took my usual seat at the long, gleaming dining table. Victoria, ever the star, launched into her next announcement. The merger with Global Tech is nearly finalized. Once it's done, I'll be named Senior VP of Operations. That's wonderful, sweetheart, my father said, eyes glowing with pride. Then he turned to me, smile dimming. And you, Jasmine, have you considered selling the bookstore? Andrew knows some developers who are very interested in that location. I took a slow sip of wine. Those developers worked for one of my own investment firms, but, of course, they had no idea. I'm happy where I am, I said calmly. Books are my passion. Andrew laughed. Passion doesn't pay the bills, little sister. While you're playing shopkeeper, Victoria and I are making real moves. If only they knew. Jasmine's Books was the storefront, beneath it lay an empire. It had all started 7 years ago, not long after I opened the store. Mr. Chen, a quiet elderly man with a fondness for philosophy books, became a regular. He lingered in the back corners, occasionally dropping pearls of wisdom about life, markets, and timing. What my family didn't know was that Mr. Chen was one of the country's most revered private investors. One afternoon, he looked up from a dog-eared copy of Marcus Aurelius and said, "You have a gift, Jasmine, you understand people, their wants, their minds. Ever thought of applying that to investments?" That single question changed the course of my life. He became my mentor. He taught me to see market patterns the way I saw story arcs, subtle, unfolding, full of hidden truths. I started small, investing my savings into undervalued startups and overlooked companies. My first major win came with a tiny tech firm developing a groundbreaking payment platform. I put in everything I had, and 18 months later, watched my investment grow tenfold. From there, I built Jade Capital Partners, named for the soft green color of my favorite reading chair. Through a web of shell companies, no one knew the quiet bookstore owner was also the founder and CEO of a billion-dollar investment firm. While my siblings flaunted their titles and multi-million-dollar deals, I was quietly buying stakes in industries across the board: tech, real estate, publishing. Even their companies weren't off limits. Earth to Jasmine. Victoria's voice snapped me out of my thoughts. Were you even listening? I was just telling everyone about my new beach house, Victoria said, her voice thick with self-satisfaction. Sorry, I murmured, slipping into character, just thinking about tomorrow's inventory. We're getting a new shipment of classics. My mother released one of her signature sighs, the kind that echoed disappointment disguised as maternal concern. Darling, you're not getting any younger. Don't you want more from life than just books? I thought about the 3 properties I owned, including a secluded island in Greece with private beaches and a helipad. I'm content, Mom, I said, with a small smile. Truly. Andrew scoffed from across the table. That's just another word for giving up. While you're content selling paperbacks, I'm closing a deal that's going to change the real estate game. I resisted the urge to laugh. The revolutionary deal he was so proud of, funded, unknowingly, by one of my subsidiaries. For the past 3 months, he'd been negotiating terms with his own sister's firm. Dinner unfolded like a well-worn script, Victoria and Andrew battling for the spotlight, my parents beaming with pride at their prodigies, and periodic interventions to discuss the concerning simplicity of my lifestyle. "I just worry about your future," my mother said gently as I stood to leave. "You can't run that tiny bookstore forever." If she'd ever seen my investment portfolio, she might worry less. But I simply kissed her cheek, slipped on my coat, and walked out, not to the apartment above the bookstore they assumed I lived in, but to my real home, a penthouse that made theirs look quaint. Inside my private office, floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline. As I powered on my workstation, monitors came alive with global market data, flickering like constellations of wealth. Asian exchanges were already open. My night was just beginning. While they believed I spent my evenings curled up with novels, I was overseeing a portfolio that shaped industries. Tomorrow would change everything. Victoria's high-stakes merger. Andrew's over-leveraged real estate empire. Both teetering, not because I made it so, but because they were built on ego, not strategy. When the market opened, they would watch their illusions of success crumble, and when the dust settled, they'd realize the only person who could save them was the sister they never took seriously. I poured a glass of scotch, an exquisite vintage my father loved to name-drop at parties. Mine was better. The screens before me told a different kind of story. One of silence, strategy, and shadowed power. The bell above my bookstore would chime again tomorrow, signaling another day of apparent simplicity. But tonight, I was writing a chapter of a story they never saw coming. The morning everything changed. I was arranging a new window display when the storm began. My phone buzzed with relentless urgency, market alerts, missed calls, frantic texts from Victoria and Andrew. I ignored them all, adjusting the angle of a leather-bound edition of Pride and Prejudice. Global tech stock had crashed 60% overnight after internal leaks revealed damning accounting irregularities. Victoria's prized merger, dead. Her career, in ruins. Andrew wasn't faring any better. His real estate house of cards was collapsing as lenders called in debts he could no longer cover. The bell above the door chimed. I turned to find Victoria standing there, drenched in panic. Her designer suit was wrinkled, her mascara smeared. She looked like a woman who had fallen from a very high place. "Jasmine," she whispered, "everything's falling apart. The reporters, I didn't know where else to go." I gestured toward the reading nook, soft chairs, shelves of stability. She sank into one without grace or pretense. "The merger's gone," she choked. "I don't know what to do." The bell chimed again. Andrew, disheveled, wild-eyed, then, confusion as he saw Victoria. "You too," he muttered. I quietly locked the door and turned the sign to closed. "I think we need to talk." "Talk?" Andrew scoffed. "What could you possibly say? The real world is burning while you're playing shop." I disappeared into the back and returned with 3 folders. "Actually, I have a lot to say, but first, read these." They opened the folders. Inside, documents showing Jade Capital Partners' significant ownership stakes in their companies, detailed audits of their poor decisions, and evidence of financial malpractice. "What is this?" Victoria whispered, her voice barely holding together. "Where did you get this?" "I own them," I said simply. "The companies, the documents, about 30% of the building we're sitting in, too." Andrew's face drained of color. "That's not possible. Jade Capital is. That's billions. They've been funding my latest project." "I know," I said, meeting his eyes. "I approved the loans." Silence. The kind that settles not from peace, but from the collapse of an illusion. "You?" Victoria's voice was paper-thin. "You're behind Jade Capital?" I moved behind my desk, a hand-carved antique, bought at an auction they hadn't even been invited to. "Did it never occur to you why I chose this location for my bookstore? The building is mine, so is the coffee shop next door, and the vintage store. I own most of this block." Andrew blinked in disbelief. "But, you're a bookstore owner." "No," I corrected him. "I'm a bookstore owner who also runs one of the most powerful private investment firms in the country." "The bookstore isn't a fallback," I said evenly. "It's the foundation. It reminds me why I started all of this." I pressed a button beneath my desk. With a soft hum, the back wall slid open, revealing a high-tech trading floor, screens alive with market data, global indexes, and flashing updates. While you were counting your millions, I continued, I was quietly building billions. Every time you dismissed my little shop, I was either financing your competitors or buying equity in your partners. Victoria stood, unsteady. But, why keep it secret? Why let us treat you like a failure? I finished, because real success isn't loud. It's not about proving people wrong. It's about doing what you love, and doing it well. I looked around my office, my sanctuary. Books taught me how to understand people, how to spot patterns, to see potential where others see nothing. My phone buzzed. I answered it on speaker. Yes, Mr. Chen. His calm, familiar voice filled the room. The board is ready. Jasmine, shall we proceed with the acquisitions? Go ahead, I said, eyes on my siblings. Execute as planned. Andrew's face paled. What acquisitions? Jade Capital is acquiring controlling interest in both of your companies, I said matter-of-factly, at generous terms. Given the current circumstances, you'll keep your titles, but my executive team will oversee operations moving forward. You're taking over, Victoria choked. I'm stabilizing them, I corrected, but if you check your phones, you'll see the board has already approved the deals. At that moment, the bookstore's front door burst open. Our parents walked in, flustered and wide-eyed. Victoria, Andrew, we heard. They stopped cold at the sight of my trading floor. My mother clutched her pearls. My father went quiet, for once. Hi, Mom, Dad, I said calmly. We were just wrapping up a business meeting. Care to join us? The next hour was filled with stunned silence and hesitant questions. I told them everything, from Mr. Chen's early advice to the rise of Jade Capital. I explained how I'd quietly taken position after position while they celebrated appearances and titles. My mother looked down, her voice barely a whisper. We judged you so harshly, and you were the most successful of all. I smiled softly. It was never about being the richest. It was about staying true to what mattered. This bookstore, these stories, they grounded me, gave me the clarity to build something real. My father cleared his throat. But with all you've achieved, why still run this place? Because I choose to, I said, because success means nothing if it costs your joy, and this, helping someone find the book that changes their life, that's still the best part of my day. In the weeks that followed, everything shifted. Victoria and Andrew adapted, humbled, quieter, wiser under Jade Capital's guidance. My parents stopped suggesting I change course. And the bookstore? It remained what it always was. The center of my world, a place of stories, and the truth behind the illusion. Mr. Chen visited more often now, still browsing philosophy. One afternoon, he looked up and said, You've taught them something no market ever could, that real power doesn't shout, it whispers. I glanced around, at the bookshelves, the reading nook, the antique desk where I'd built an empire. You know what the best part is? I said, I still get to read the best stories first. Today, Jade Capital continues to grow, but every morning, I unlock the door to Jasmine's books. Because while I may own companies, real estate, and market shares, this bookstore, it owns me.